You guys, I am so thrilled to have our next guest on the podcast this week. It is Tor, and can you pronounce your last name for me?
Matkowski.
Matkowski. Okay, that's not as bad as I thought.
Pretty
So
phonetic.
I'm going to let Tor Matkowski tell you more about herself, and you'll see really quickly why I wanted to pick her brain on the podcast.
So yes, my full name is actually Victoria Matkowski, but most people do know me as Tor. That has been my nickname my whole life. I've been a pediatric SLP for like 13 years now. And I'm originally from just outside of Philadelphia, but I've been in San Diego for 11 years now, after I did grad school in Washington, D.C., and worked in that area for a few years. I've spent most of my career in private practice, working in private clinics. And so I still see most kids in the clinic, but I see some families in their homes and do a little bit of virtual coaching with families. And I now have a YouTube channel for Gestalt language processors.
And that is what is so exciting and uh, why I'm so, I don't know, eager to talk to you because we all have been hearing more about Gestalt language processing. And I think those of us in the classroom, or if a parent is listening, we all know that a lot of our kids and students are really musical or drawn to music, or if you sing something, it tends to make more sense. And as we learn more about Gestalt language processing, I think this connection between music for GLPs is really important. So, can you give us a brief overview about what Gestalt language processing is? If someone's listening and they're like, wait, what word are you saying?
Right. I will try my best to be brief. That's not my strong suit. But so there are two types of language processing. Most people know about analytic language processing, which is often considered to be kind of the typical way to learn language. And that is where babies or toddlers begin to use single words as units of meaning and later realize they can use those words as building blocks to combine them to form phrases and eventually sentences and so on. And then the other kind of lesser known, although luckily more and more people are learning about it, type of language development is Gestalt language processing. And this is, by the way, just how many autistic kids develop language. And this is where children initially are using gestalts as units of meaning. And a gestalt is a chunk of language that is intonationally defined and often is attached to an emotion or experience for a child. And I'll kind of explain that a little bit more in a second. But a gestalt could be a word, a phrase, a song, could be dialogue from a show, lines from a book, language heard from just people around them. And so a child will essentially just take something that they've heard, a chunk of language, and they'll repeat it as they originally heard it. And it's not always super clear, but you can recognize the intonation pattern is usually the same. And they'll use that to communicate. And that is what is also known as delayed echolalia, or you might hear it referred to as scripting. And so these kids initially don't realize that these chunks are made up of individual words that each have their own individual meanings. And so what's holding the meaning for them is just those intonation patterns or that melody of our speech that they hear. And again, there's often some kind of emotion tied to it. And so sometimes you can't take what they say literally, and it might require a little bit of detective work to figure out the meaning. And I kind of feel like explaining this is it's helpful to give examples sometimes. So I had a little guy who was a Mickey Mouse Clubhouse fan. And in that show, I learned that when Mickey and friends run into some kind of problem they have to solve, they say, "Oh, Toodles." And they call upon this character, this I don't know, this other character that comes along and helps them out when there's a problem to solve. And so this little friend of mine, when he needed help with something, he would say, "Oh, Toodles," because, right, that made sense to him. That's what Vicky and them say. And so another common example, I feel like, for kids is they fall down and they say, "Are you okay?" Because that is what they've heard when they bonk into something or fall down, and that's usually what an adult around them will say. And so they've kind of mapped that language onto that situation. So they're not asking, "Are you okay?" That's just that's their gestalt for like, "I'm hurt, I fell down, I need comfort," something along those kinds of lines. Or another example might be, again, like you had mentioned, many GLPs are musical. So let's say it's raining outside and a kid starts singing, "It's raining, it's pouring," right? That song, because to them that means like they don't have the language to say, "Oh, look, it's raining outside," but that is what that gestalt, is holds that meaning for them. So, yeah, so for GLPs, they start with using that delayed echolalia in the beginning, and they eventually gradually kind of move towards using more flexible or self-generated language. Marge Blanc is the one that coined the term natural language acquisition, or NLA, where she has outlined those 6 stages that the GLPs move through. And some kids kind of get a little bit stuck in using that delayed echolalia, and they need a little bit more support to kind of guide them through those stages. So we can use the NLA stages kind of as a framework, as our guide when we are supporting these kids. Sorry, that was a little bit of a long one. I just feel like there's a lot to know.
Yeah, I love that because you gave such good examples that are really realistic. People listening are going to be like, oh, yeah, I had a student that said, "Are you okay?" I've had so many actually, students that would use, "Are you okay?" Same exact example. Someone that maybe doesn't understand echolalia, Gestalt language processing, might hear that and say, why are you asking? I'm fine. I'm fine." And, not realize that they're reflecting back what they've heard when they're hurt or upset. And it's almost self-soothing. And it also has a purpose of like letting you know, like you said, "I'm hurt." So those were really great examples. Thank you for sharing those.
Yeah, of course.
And I love how you summed up Gestalt language processing without the technical pieces. You and I were talking about the stages and all of that, but the way that you kind of summed it up in, I don't know, layman's terms, real life terms, I think it's going to benefit a lot of people. So thank you for that. And if you guys don't know Tor yet, she makes videos on YouTube or for YouTube with Gestalt language processors in mind. So can you expand on this? Like, where did you get the idea? How did you start? And then you just kept going.
Yeah. So yeah, to give a little bit of background about how my channel came to be. So I became super passionate about Gestalt language development and neurodiversity affirming practices a few years ago. And I just really started digging into those topics and also applying that new knowledge that I had. And I realized what a game changer it really was for my clients. Um, and so I got this idea one night a couple years ago. This thought just like popped into my head. I'm like, wait a second. We know that so many of our GLPs pick up gestalts and language from the shows that they watch, from YouTube
Mhm.
videos. What if I made videos specifically for them? And so that was kind of the initial thought, was like to make Miss Rachel-esque content, if you will, but for our GLPs. And the more that I thought about it, I realized like how much it could also potentially help parents too,
Mm.
or other adults that are, supporting GLPs. And I know that you just recently had Mr. Clay on talking about what a valuable tool video modeling is. And that the concept of my channel is essentially video modeling, with the goal or intention to be, being to model language for kids, as well as some other things like regulation strategies and whatnot, but also to demonstrate for the adults like how to model language,
Mhm.
because I feel like it's one thing to be told like what to do or what not to do when it comes to modeling language, but I think it's more helpful and makes more sense to people when they can actually see it in action.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought about that. I love video modeling for in a variety of settings, uses, that kind of thing. But I hadn't thought about using it like you are to model the language of the way that it could be presented best for GLPs. And so right when you said that, I thought of the pronoun reversals that a lot of GLPs experience. So with the example, are you okay? The child saying, are you okay? Their pronoun, they're referring to themselves that they are hurt or uncomfortable, but they're not saying, I'm hurt. They're saying you because that's what we say to them. We say, are you okay? So a lot of times we recommend for GLPs for parents and educators to model it from the child's perspective. So instead of asking them, are you okay? You could see that they're hurt and say, I'm hurt, that kind of thing. And so is that one of the ways that you're using language from the child's perspective?
Yeah, so I kind of basically envisioned, I thought about like what scenarios do families and kids frequently find themselves in? So like different daily routine things, play activities, different places like grocery store and park. And I'm like, okay, what language would be kind of useful for them in those scenarios, that those familiar contexts?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm also on screen by myself, so there's not really opportunity for me to, say things like you or your
Yeah.
whatever. Um, but I've also I don't ask questions, is another kind of thing that they do in some other shows. They kind of do these like questions and kind of are trying to like elicit participation or a response from the kids in the audience, but
Yeah.
I don't do that. I mean, occasionally I will model a question, but it's very intentional. Like
Mhm.
I'm modeling that for the child. Like if,
Yeah.
like, where did it go? Or, ooh, what's this? Or I actually did you see that? After I do something cool or whatever, because that is something that the child could pick up. And it would make sense to be using the
Absolutely.
you pronoun in that scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
love this. I love just the perspective that you take with it, that you're using routines that can be helpful for parents and, whether they're at home or in the community. And so what are some of, you said like going to the park, what are some of the topics that you've done videos about?
Oh man. Okay. So I have like, yeah, routine ones, bedtime, bath time. I have park. I have having a snack, getting a drink of water. I have like a haircut one that's more of like kind of a
Oh,
social
nice.
ish one. I recently put out like a potty one that's kind of similar to that. I have a Halloween one.
Oh,
That one's been popular recently. What else? I have one just modeling playing with bubbles, with blocks, with
mm,
Play-Doh, just kind of things that a lot of kids like to play with. And so,
yeah.
hers, so they can kind of see that. Like I said, pick up my model. I've actually gotten a lot of feedback from families too that like a lot of kids like to get the thing, whatever, they get their Play-Doh out, get their bubbles out or whatever, and kind of like follow along
Mm.
while they're watching. So I thought that was kind of cool too.
Yeah, that's really great feedback. I know in the classroom when I've used video modeling for different things, a lot of times kids will more readily imitate what's in the video versus something I'm modeling. For
Right?
some reason, that video just captures their interest and engages them more than we can. And part of me thinks that part of it is that the video stays the same every time. So every time they watch Tor do the activity with the bubbles, it's the same. It's super predictable. And that allows for engagement for kids that maybe aren't as flexible and they like things to stay the same. And it's that predictable routine for them where I might switch it up in person. If I blow bubbles, I might be saying different things each time or that kind of thing. So I think the video lends itself really nicely to that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, I do think that's definitely a piece of it, like you said, the familiarity. But
Yeah.
I there's something else about screens that
Yes.
for whatever reason, it resonates more. I mean, I think with a lot of the things that they pick up, like, the characters are kind of using more exciting intonation and it's kind of more dramatic. Usually shows are more dramatic than like real life. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that's a piece of it too. But mine, uh, I'm like surprised that it has resonated with so many kids because I actually tried as much as possible to model pretty naturally and not be like super like feel like I was like in being a character, like
Yeah.
acting. I really, for the most part, I model language as if a child was like right there with me and I just kind of do as I naturally would. So I don't feel like my intonation is over the top or anything,
But it's
for
resonating.
but
It's
it's
working.
resonating apparently.
I
So
love
that's
that.
really cool.
And speaking of music, why can you tell us a little bit more about why GLPs connect with music so much?
Sure. So, I mean, Corinne's Moose would be your girl. She'd be the one to ask, if you really want to know, get into the science behind the why. I can't really speak to that. And I know that she has spent a lot of time digging into the research from different disciplines and things like that as it explores, sorry, different aspects of music as it relates to Gestalt language processing.
Hmm.
I believe she even has a course. But um, knowing that GLPs are intonation babies, it does make a lot of sense that music resonates with kids. They're naturally keyed into those melodies. They're very drawn to rich intonation and they make meaning out of those intonation patterns. And I know that many GLPs are also reported to have perfect pitch, which is really
Mm.
cool and interesting, that ability to just recognize pitch, the pitch of a note or produce any note. And so, yeah, music is a really powerful tool, I think, for a lot of kids. It's why music therapy is a discipline. And I've observed it with clients and also have been given lots of feedback from parents and therapists how impactful the songs specifically from my videos have been. Um, Songs are a great way to connect with kids. They
Hmm.
capture their attention, they're fun, they feel good to lots of kids, and they can also learn from them. And then I don't know if I mentioned this, but so in my videos, yeah, I've created a lot of songs that I actually just stole or borrowed the melodies to different nursery rhymes because
Oh, yeah.
I I don't really honestly have a musical bone in my body, but I knew I wanted to include songs in my videos. I knew that was really important. So I had this idea of creating songs that included language that would be easy to mitigate and also useful for them in everyday situations. So, like some examples of my song titles are I'm hungry. Can you help me? Let's do it again. It's bedtime. And so, yeah, I again just borrowed those melodies and I thought, okay, what if I just change the lyrics so this language can be more
Yeah.
powerful and mitigatable as compared to like singing about Ring Around the Rosie and, Baba Black Sheep. So, I um what was I going to say? I'm sorry. Yeah, so in my songs I provide them, language models in a way that may resonate for them more than just like providing a regular verbal model. And in some of my songs too, I have kind of tried to like give information about a situation or things that could help them work through a situation or emotions. So those are kind of
Yeah.
some
That's,
things that I was intentional about when I made these songs.
yeah, I love it. I think I heard from a kindergarten teacher once, they call that like a piggyback song. So you're just piggybacking off of the tune. And I
Perfect.
think that's actually really genius because these are tunes that a lot of kids probably already know. And then switching up the lyrics, I, I think that probably is part of why they're so popular. It's really
Yeah, I
exciting.
mean, I think the other piece of it too is like, okay, adults, I know a lot of grown-ups already know these melodies.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the other piece. And I didn't know the first place to start if I was going to go about, writing a song. I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I'll just do it this way. And then also that way too, I'm kind of demonstrating for parents like, hey, it doesn't need to be, you don't need to be like a musical person to just like borrow a nursery rhyme song and make up your own little song.
Yes.
Whatever lyrics are going to work for your kid or suit your needs.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. So you have shared some ways that you recommend using the videos when it comes to topics and stuff. Do you have any other tips for parents or teachers when they're using videos or songs to support Gestalt language processors?
Sure. So number one, something I mentioned in all my like video descriptions is I really recommend co-watching whenever possible. I have always said my channel is for the GLPs and for the grown-ups that are supporting them. Because the adults get to see examples of kind of how to model, what they might want to model during certain routines or activities, playing with certain toys, as I said. And the other reason to co-watch is because let's say my content does seem to be really resonating with a child, and a child picks up a gestalt from my video, but it's not maybe super intelligible.
Yeah.
Well, the parent or adult is going to be more likely to recognize or understand the Gestalt if they're more familiar with the language that I use in my videos. So kind of just
Yeah.
like with any other media that the child watches.
Yeah. That's a great point. I love your Instagram account because you have so many great little tips and that kind of thing. So I encourage everyone to go check her out. We'll link it in the show notes. But what other resources do you have to support Gestalt language processors?
If you go to playtimewithtor.co, I have a free resource library. And so in there, there's a few things in there. I have a handout with all the different strategies that I use in my videos. There's also a strategy survey there where it's kind of like a checklist you could use to help identify different strategies for families to like
Mm.
implement or focus on. There's another resource in there that's a Playtime with Tor song quick reference sheet. And so that is basically a list of all my songs and kind of the communicative function of them. And then there's a link that can just allow you to just like easily pull up the video or the song if you need
Oh,
kind of a refresher or you just need to pull up a song in a moment. So I recommend people either just like have that saved in their notes or on their phone somewhere in the whatever the
yeah.
files, or just on your desktop. Um, and there is also just a Gestalt language processing resource list of all different webinars, Instagram accounts, different things to learn more about GLP. And then soon, hopefully, there'll be a song guide coming, which will have all the lyrics to all my songs, as well as like some different templates and ideas to kind of come up with your own alternate versions of songs. And so that is in the works.
Oh my gosh, that is so exciting. That's
Yeah,
going to be helpful for parents and educators.
yeah.
I can't wait to see it. I cannot wait. So, you guys, you have to go check Victoria out in all the places. So, obviously, you're on Instagram, um, Play with Tor, right? Is that what it is?
Playtime for sure.
Playtime. I knew it didn't sound quite
Yeah.
right. Playtime
Mm.
with Tor. And I will link it so you can get to the right place. Easy peasy. But where else can everyone find you?
Yeah, Instagram and YouTube is both Playtime with Tor. My website is playtimewithtor.co. And I think that's probably it.
Okay, those are the main places. Oh my gosh. Yay. I'm so glad that we connected because once people go and they watch some of your videos, they're going to realize, where has this been? Why didn't I know about this already? And I think a lot of special educators in schools are gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna use this at my circle time or even during like a small group doing some activities together.
Yeah, actually, I mean, so it's funny that you mentioned that because when I started doing the videos, I really just had like parents in mind, and I didn't really even think so much about therapists and like teachers using it. But I got a message recently from a teacher that was like, "Oh my gosh, we love your pumpkin video. We recently incorporated it into like our lesson. We watched your
Oh,
pumpkin patch video and then passed around pumpkins, and I'm sure they, kind of modeled back language from the video, like, oh, this one's so bumpy, or this is a big one, or that kind of thing. So I thought that was like really cool. I didn't even think about using the videos like in therapy or in classrooms
yeah.
that way, but I thought that was really cool.
That is really cool. Oh my gosh, that brings some ideas up in my head. I'll run that by you afterwards. And
Yeah,
if we come
totally.
up with a collaboration, I'll let everybody know. But
Yeah,
I've
for
got some
sure.
ideas rolling around now because that is so neat. Teachers are always looking for more ideas and practical ways that they can help their students who are GLPs. So I think this is going to resonate with them too. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Tara. I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of share a bit about my story and talk about my channel. And yeah, I hope it can help some more GLPs out there.
Oh, it absolutely will.